Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk on Can You Design a 500 lot subdivision in an hour? Now, we're going to look at this from a standpoint of we're not looking for a perfect design or what I would almost call construction document level. For the ones who have seen SiteOps, you understand that it's not here to replace any tool you use today. It's here to help you do things a lot faster and look at more options. Now, with using SiteOps, there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. The first one is it's not going to do construction level design. But again, if I did a 500 lot subdivision in an hour and I got some level of grading, I'm not expecting that. The other thing, I like to set this out in the very beginning so everybody can get an understanding of what you're going to look at. SiteOps will not do the design for you. It is a tool set that will help you do it faster. So you need to have an understanding of what it is to design, especially in residential. If a client tells me I have a site and I need a parking lot in the front and a 10,000 square foot building and two driveways. Okay, there's a designing we need to do, but some of that's already sort of been done for us, from the first conceptual, and then we look for other things. A lot of times when it comes to residential, nobody has any idea of what it's going to look like. That's our job. Whether you're an engineer, architect, landscape architect, land developer that's trying to design, our goal is to look at as many options as possible in a reasonable amount of time to try to find the one that makes all the stakeholders happy. So just a little bit about me before we get started, just so you understand. For the ones on here that do subdivision design, I come from your world. I've been an engineer for over 20 years here in North Carolina. I had a company called Neighborhood Designs for years, just outside of Charlotte. Our primarily thing that we did was subdivisions, probably 90% of our work. Anything from a 2 or 3 lot little quick subdivision to number of communities that were well over 6,000 lots, basically master plan communities. So I want you, as I said earlier, ask the questions because the odds are if you ask the questions, I've done that type of development, and I'll be able to tell you how SiteOps fits into the workflow and how it's able to actually do what you want to do. Another real quick housekeeping, I just want to throw in here real fast. If you, because some graphics in this, if what you're seeing is like way behind what you're hearing, please just type something in the question and answer just so I can make sure that we're staying on key. All right, so let's get started with this tech talk. So let's start by looking at the traditional step in land development. In the lower right-hand corner, odds are most of y'all have this book. If you don't, I don't get any kickback. So, but I do like to everybody who's fresh into land development, read this book. It's been around for probably 30 something years by Sidney Dewberry. It's a fan, and a bunch of other architects and engineers and landscape architects that write this book. Is a great sort of like how-to guide in land development. There's a section in there called the traditional steps in land development. Again, this is not just residential; it's across the board, but this really falls into residential, and we'll see a little more in a minute. So one of the first steps you do is we got to look at feasibility and programming. Feasibility is basically what is the site there? Where is it located? What can be done on the site? Programming. What are we trying to, what are you trying to do on the project? Those are the kind of things we're trying to solve when we're looking at feasibility and programming. For example, if you can't do residential, might not be a good site. You have to go through rezoning and all other kind of scenarios that can be time consuming and cost a lot of money, but you can go forward. We have to look at this from a feasible standpoint. Now, the next big thing is going to be site analysis. What's happening on the site? What are the physical characteristics? What are my utilities? What actually is on the site that is good and bad? Biggest thing we look at is what can encumber the site, right? And then we want to be able to figure out how to put that into our design considerations as we're going forward. And then we want to look at concept design. Conceptual design, this is where we're going to spend in just a few moments when we go into sites. This is where we're really going to hit the key of what's going on today in this tech talk. Because this is also the most important part. This is where a lot of times we spend a lot of effort up front as designers. We go in and sometimes we get very little to no pay in this phase as well. We're trying to help the client get a project approved. And then, especially in residential, you can make a lot of money because a lot of us are paid per lot. So the more lots we can get, the more money we can get. And if we have surveying services, double or triple that depending on where you're at in the world. But we got to make sure that it's right, and we got to help the client get to that point. And then we're going to go into schematic. Now, this book was written back in, or the first version was back in, I think, around mid 70s. It's got more versions, so it uses schematic. We more refer to this day a lot of times as preliminary. This is where we're going to start putting dimensions and borders and notes and all this kind of stuff. This is where you already have tools that do that. If you're doing site development residential, you're using one of the Autodesk products, one of the Bentley products, one of the Carlson products. You're using something that does a fantabulous job making construction documents and making preliminary plans. We're not here to talk about that. We're talking about how to get the best design to go into those tools and work. And of course, there's always final design. That's ultimately where we want to make everybody happy. We get to that. We build the project, and hopefully the client comes back for the next project. So let's talk about conceptual just for a second. Now, this came straight out of the Charlotte Land Development Ordinance. We're going to use this as sort of the background of our project today. But this is a sketch plan phase. Again, conceptual. Everybody likes to call it different things. But you're looking for some proposed layout, streets, features, different things. You go, no, there's not a lot of requirements, right? Because it's in that preliminary sketch, because they know we're going to go through iteration after iteration between owner, who is the owner going to sell the lots to? So we got a home builder. Then we got zoning boards, planning commissions, a board of adjustments. We got planning staff, tons of different people, engineering, utilities, that have to look at this plan and give some feedback. But think about if I did 10 layouts to a project. And in residential, most of us know 10 is not that many revisions. The last thing I want to have to do is go to preliminary plan requirements on every single one of them. So what you're going to see today is we're going to get a lot of information. We're going to do a lot of really beyond what we call a napkin sketch or a sketch plan. We're going to go further down into that process, but we're going to do it faster than you do a sketch plan with your favorite CAD tool today. So that's the really cool part. We're going to add some speed in this, which again allows us to look at multiple scenarios. Because here's what they require for a preliminary plan. That's the whole notes. That's the scales, the dimensions, all the kind of different information they want to see on there. This takes time. We just physically can't do that on 10, 15 different layouts. So we want to try to do as much stuff up front, get the clients, get them all involved, make sure we've met those scenarios, met with the different boards, get some ideas of what's going to happen, and quickly be able to make those revisions. So when we do go to this phase, we're only doing it a few times. We're not doing it 10 or 12 times. So again, this is Parcel Standards, showing a little bit just in case anybody here has never really done residential before and wanted to see what it's about. This is a typical Parcel Standards. In Charlotte, we do R3, 4, R5, and so on. We have size requirements. We have width and depth and setbacks and all kinds. This is just a little snapshot of it. I just want to show a little bit of that. And then there's always roadways. And always in their manual gives a nice, pretty little colored scene that looks like this. And sometimes this is kind of stuff we put on our preliminary plan to help people understand what we're doing. But the reality is, this is what we're doing. This is what we're designing. And you're going to see that as we get into this in just a few moments. This is what we're working with. We're going to work with detail of this level, and we're going to do it really fast. We're going to be able to put in the parcel requirements and have it generate parcels for us. And if I change something like the roadway location, it's going to change that as well. Then I just want to do this real quick before we jump into showing sites. I'm going to spend most of my time in this tech talk in SiteOps playing around. But this is something, this is one of a design I did probably 12, 15 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. It was in Conover, North Carolina. It was called Fox Run. I think when I went back and looked, I think this was version 39A. I couldn't even tell you how many versions we went on this project. And this is, again, what kills us a lot of times. We have to go through iteration after iteration after iteration. And we spent months on this project. And, you know, those are the kind of things that just happen is we go into those scenarios and we do, you know, different projects and we do them over and over, ultimately trying to get the client happy. And in this case, this was probably a bad one for us because I don't even know if we even made money on this project because it never even got built. So this is part of our deliverable as the design professionals. Again, it's not just helping them do the project that does work. It's also finding out, is the project worth doing? In this case, it was a perfect scenario. We did probably 50 plus designs because we went back and forth through governmental agencies such as planning, board of adjustment, city council. This developer sold everything to home builders to make everybody happy. We could never come up with a plan that made a developer enough money, made him happy to go forward with the project. If we could, we would have. But what really hurt my company is at the end of the day, I think we got a few dollars out of this, but not near what we spent into it. I would have dreamed of having SiteOps. This would have been something I could have ran through 50 iterations in maybe 2 days, not 2 months. So this is what we're going to talk about. How can we sort of look in and get that data and get that basically our experience into the software. So let's jump in. I'm going to start working on an actual project. We're going to design something. And again, this is something I love to say. Let's design, not draft. The way the world in software is changing, it's about creating models, it's about designing. And since we're coming up with new ways of doing things, we can also come up with new workflows, which that is something that we really like to do because it makes life a lot simpler. So let's get out of this. I'm going to go right to the bottom. I'm going to open up SiteOps. We're just going to go to log it in. It's a web-based software, so again, people love this. I can get anywhere in the world. I can come in and, for example, we're going to do an update here before long. You don't have to do anything to really get SiteOps up and going. It just works automatically for you. So I'm going to jump right into a project area. Let's just come in, do one we're going to call it a May Tech Talk. And we're going to start in this SiteOps project just as if the client called me up and said, hey, I got a location that's off of Blakeney Heath Road, and it's a couple parcels. I need you to get the best information you can, and we want to see the best design we can. So, and let's just go in and get started. So once you get in, it's all about importing data. We got to find data. Again, part of that sketch phase and some of that feasibility is acquiring data, and sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. It depends on where you're at in the world. With SiteOps, we're going to make it really easy. I'm going to just type in the location of the roadway that the client told me. Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. And just let it zoom into it. So it's picked up a couple locations, but I just know because, like most of us when we do residential, a lot of times it's in the region that we already know. Heath Road is right here on the right-hand side, and after what the client told me, it ran from Heath Road over to the intersection of Providence Road West and Community House. So let's turn on my Google type image, ESRI Google Underlay. We can see he told me it's a big wooded area, so the odds are we're looking at this piece of property right here. We don't know yet. We're going to go in and start determining some of this information. But what I want to do is say select location in the upper right. SiteOps is going to put this on state plane coordinates for this region. So if I get data later on to bring in, great. I can bring more accurate data. Right now, I want to come in and let's get a topo. So I want to go to USGS, click a button. Just a few moments, less than a minute, I've got a surface. Now, I've also seen the contour. So again, everything we do inside of SiteOps today is going to look two-dimensional, but in the long run, we're doing it in a 3D form. We try to make it nice and easy for the users. So again, they more worry about designing, like I said, and less about drafting and less about making a model. So I want to get some imagery under this. Let's just go to ESRI. You can always use your own. You can also use drone data. That's really popular now that people are using from, things like context capture, and you get 3MX models and different stuff like this. I like the ESRI model. Let me turn off these contours for a second. You can actually see as further I zoom in, the more detailed the map or the image becomes. It's really neat to be able to have those different levels. I'm going to do a quick clip. And I'm going to turn off the ESRI level or layer, depending on what you're used to hearing that called. And this is going to basically just work in my area that I have. So now I have the general site location. Now the problem is that blue cyan colored box, that's my property boundary, not the property boundary of what we're working with. So like a lot of us, we can get GIS data online. We can get it from local municipalities. You can buy a disk, just download it. In this case, for example, where I'm at in North Carolina, we can just download it. I can just go into Mecklenburg County. I want to go into parcels. In this case, I just want parcels, and I just want to merge it in. Now, if you think about a lot of times you deal with GIS data, especially when you deal with parcels and on county levels, things like that, you got to bring in the whole area and you got to clean it out and clip it up and get it to the area that you use. We do that for you automatically. SiteOps brings it in. And if you noticed, it clipped I didn't bring in all of this out of Charlotte. I brought in just the area that I need. And I'm going to turn down the background image. So now I need to define a boundary. And this, again, has to come from somebody to tell you which pieces of land you're using. So in this case, I'm just going to come in, use a chain command we have. Now, if you had meets and bounds, again, just depending on whatever information you have to work with, overshot that boundary a little bit, you would definitely want to use that. SiteOps can come in and use whatever information you want to. Actually, let's go back. I forgot the client did actually say to use this piece, so let's come down. I want to go across, and all I'm going to do now is just do a little boundary, and I'm just following around what the client would have told me we needed to make this project work. You see, very simple process. I'm going to go right, zoom in just a little bit into this corner, just because there's two lines there, and just got to tell SiteOps what to grab. Just take a second. Again, SiteOps is a really helpful software, but at the end of the day, it doesn't replace you. It's not It's not an engineer and architect. It's a tool. I'm going to tell it to do a closed path. Now, SiteOps works a little different than most everything else we deal with in the CAD industry. It's not lines and curves in some areas. SiteOps deals with a lot of paths and areas, and we can make these intelligent. So I've told it I have a nice closed area up in the upper right. I want to say convert to an area. This actually makes it intelligent. If you noticed, all of a sudden I got properties, min, max, slope, what's my material type, do we have topsoil? But I want to go and tell it one more thing. Above that, I want to tell it it's the property boundary. So I'm going to go in and say use as, click that area, say use as boundary, just type in US, it knows what to do. And now it's come in and done this. For the purpose of today, I'm just going to come into this outer boundary, and I'm just going to say, let's pick the boundary, pick the sides, and we're going to set the setbacks to 0. Now, again, these are not lot setbacks. This is overall project. For example, if I was putting a manufacturing plan in here, it'd be more the boundaries for there. But as we know in residential, the setbacks go with the actual individual lot, and you'll see that as we get a little further along. Now, the other stuff we can bring in is, again, very important data. Maybe I'm just looking at the topo. Let's go back to this topo. I can see we definitely have some information. We have some creeks on this project. So again, if you had buffers and swim buffers and all this kind of stuff, if you had wetland maps, anything, again, you can get in CAD format, GIS, bring them in. Let's just say right now, I just want to go in and see if OpenStreetMap has anything. I click the button. There we go. We can actually see we have some creeks. So I go back up to my levels, and I want to, let's turn off a couple of things. I really don't need the center line of the street. I can go in and say, let's change those creeks to blue. Makes it a little easier for me to see. So now I have to worry about creeks. We have creek crossings. Again, all these little things start adding in, especially when we start looking at governmental review. So I'm going to also turn off, just for now, we're going to turn off this shape file, because this is the area we're working in. We want to do a project. Let's say the zoning says we can have an R4 development, but the client, like most of them, they want to get maximum lot yield, right? Well, a lot of us realize that sometimes maximum lot yield is not always by following the rules. We want to go out, and if we're allowed, we want to do a cluster development. Maybe we want to do a PUD, want to go for conditional use. Again, tons of different ways to get around having to deal with the density on a project. Now, in SiteOps, for example, we'd have to have creek buffers. It'd probably be really costly to go in this area and make a nice little park so we can have a common space. And these are the kind of things, again, software will not tell you. That's the design skill. That's the experience that we need when we're going to design something. So I'm going to go in real quick, and we're going to just identify with that chain tool again. I'm just going to identify an area that I want to start doing some parcel design in. Let's just zoom into the area in the bottom so I can pick up that little line. We'll follow it right back up. And what I've told SiteOps is in this area, I want to design parcels. Now, just like I had to change the boundary, I'm going to do the same thing as we go into this. I'm going to go up to the top, say convert to area. But in this case, in time, instead of saying use as boundary, I'm going to tell it it's a parceling area. And if you noticed, it changed just a little bit. Now, here's one of the really neat things that we do with SiteOps. And again, most softwares have templates and dialogue, so this is not the neat part. It's about adding intelligence. So, for example, if you're doing residential and you're used to working in this area, every time you put in the parameters for a certain type of lot, you save it, and then you can have templates that are based on whatever you want. You can share them in the company. You can use them for just yourself as a department, however you want to. You can even put them as whether they're single family, multifamily, duplexes. We'll give you some categories so you can try to start mix and matching those. So you can see, for example, I have Charlotte R3, 4, and 8. Different scenarios. If I look at a 3, for example, it's 10,000 square foot lot. It knows its requirements. On the left-hand side are my layout constraints. On my right-hand side is my grading. Same with the images above, layout versus grading. The client said we wanted an R4 zoning. So let's go in. I'm going to tell it it's R4, and I'm going to say apply. Now, nothing's happened, right? Okay. One thing about SiteOps is for me to actually do something, I've got to be able to give it some form of ingress and egress. So let's go in and do this. We're going to start setting up a street center line. So let's go up to draw, and I'm just going to do a path to start with. I'm going to do a nice easy way. Let's turn off the help. I'm going to just draw a path, say along this edge right there. And I want to offset that path that I just drew. So let's see, the lot is for an R4, it's 133.5 deep. That's the requirement. I've got a 25-foot driveway or right-of-way, or 50-foot, but I'm sorry, 25 to the center. So we're at 158.5. And let's say on these outer edge, I want to give a little 10-foot buffer. So about 168.5 to the center line of the roadway. Now at this point, I want to offset. Let's just do 158.5 to the back of the lot. Let's offset 158.5 to the other roadway. I'm going to get rid of this lot. Don't need that anymore. So let's tell, just like we did before, we need to tell this line. Now this is a path, not an area. So if I pick on, I go up to the upper right, and I want to say car drive. Now, there's my drive. Fairly simple, nothing fancy, right? If I come in, and let's look at these roadways, I can actually go to select all the sides, and we have a template for this as well. I can save my local standards in. So if I come in and look at this road, we're going to actually bring it all the way through the project and tie into the other roadway. So we're probably going to look at this as a collector level. So we're going to leave this different than the other one. So I'm going to go to a residential collector. You can see I have a little bit wide. I have about 17-foot face-to-face roadway. I got my cross sections. How are we going to deal with sidewalk? And the reason some of those are yellow and some are not, because you can set default properties for pretty much anything in SiteOps. This is telling me, based on my default, this is how this is areas that things differ. So I hit apply, and I'm going to go to the other roadway, and we're going to add in just a regular local residential, 12.5 face-to-face from center line. But you're going, wow, I still see nothing, right? Well, here's where SiteOps differentiates from any other tool. There's 3 little buttons in the upper right-hand corner. Let's hit Layout Solver. All right, you see one road has lots and the other one doesn't. If you cannot get in and out of the roadway, SiteOps is smart enough to understand you need to come in and solve a few issues. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go up to the top, and we're going to start editing this section. I'm going to draw a point. Again, back to experience. I'm going to move the end of this road, and we're going to bring up the image, and I'm going to tie into the existing roadway. Now, if I had some nice CAD drawings that had line work, SiteOps would tie right into that line work. In this case, I don't really have anything, maybe a little too early in the process. Let's give this roadway a radius. But also, you see these 2 lots in the beginning that don't like them, right? They're sort of not what we want. So you do have the ability to come in and edit parcels and make them different in different areas along the roadway. In this case, I'm just going to tell SiteOps, for that first little entrance, I don't even want lots at all. They don't look good. They won't sell. So let's just disregard them. So now if I come in and drop a point, let's just do one here. And let's just bring this road up. We'll bring it up perpendicular. And now you're going to see lots formed on that roadway because I have the ability to get in and out. Even though the other ends are still dead ends at this point, it starts to understand that we can start doing something. So let's drop a point. We're going to do the same thing on this side. So you can start, I think, hopefully seeing that, when I say you can do a subdivision in 500 lots in less than an hour, you're going to start seeing why. I've quickly come in, and now at this point, it's also things like, I got to add more roadways, too long of a block length. Let's go perpendicular from one end to the other, do the midpoint. Again, however we want to draw this, I can quickly come in and do it. SiteOps can be creative. It's all up to your imagination as to what you want a subdivision to look like. It doesn't really care. I can come in and do something simple like this. Let's add some radiuses to it so it looks a little better. Let's just say 250. So the lots will start looking nicer, and I could put a cul-de-sac in. So got a lot of things you can do creative. Now, one thing we get hit with a lot, again, is we're trying to hit a density. So we want to mix and match how some of the lots are happening. So let's just say, in this case, for now, the client has R4 on this side, he wants R8. So one thing you can come in is, let's go back. Maybe I'd go through the whole version as an R4, and then I would save that off and come back and do a save as, typical type stuff, and come back and start doing another design. So let's just go. I'm going to get rid of some of these parcel points. Get rid of the points. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in. I'm going to tell SiteOps, let's get rid of a few more parcel points. Because remember, those are just the limits of where it defined it. And I'm going to bring it to just one side of the road. I'm going to draw one right here. And now at this point, I've defined all the R4 to one side of the roadway. Let's come in. At this point, instead of doing a chain, I'm just going to go in and draw something. I want to show you a difference as well. Because we noticed, even though that parcel area is way out to the edge, if I don't draw anything out there, it doesn't draw it. So in this case, I'm going to go to parcel, and I'm just going to come in, and let's just zoom into the roadway. Don't really want to overlap the other one very much. It's not a big deal if you do, but let's just come in, grab this. We'll just come along the edge because we don't want to buffer on the roadway. And let's just go in and do something like this. So now what I've done, create another parcel area. Again, so you can have as many of these as you want. If you notice, it went ahead and created my lots from my default, which is I think 10 or 11,000 square feet, 10,000 at 50 by 150. I can come in now and say, let's do an R8 and do apply. Now I've got that smaller lot. Then at this point, it's fairly similar to what we did on the last one. I want to offset, let's see, I think it's about 225. If I'm doing the math right in my head, to the next center line, come in, change this to a car path. At this point, just go in, let's go to draw, drop a point, give it some access, and there we go. Same thing on this end. Let's just drop a point, give it some access, pick on that roadway, get all points, and let's add a radius. So quickly we've come in again, did another design. So one thing I want to do, just for time, I do a little more of a traditional lot graded type development. In the long run, you can do any kind of project you want, whether it's coving, whether it's traditional. Again, it doesn't matter. Get creative as you want. SiteOps can handle what you're putting into it. So let's go in. Oh, and here's one little thing I want you to notice. You see some of the red exclamation points. Basically, all SiteOps is telling me based on setbacks, if I stop the solver, based on setbacks, I cannot have a house that ultimately meets my buildable area based on setback. So I can come in and tell the client, you know, maybe the lot still works, do you want it, but you got to do a different house. And we know most of our clients, they're fine with having one or two lots or a couple that have a smaller house print. What they would much rather sell that lot knowing that, you know, maybe they don't get quite as much, but they still get something, right? So let's go back. Let's draw another roadway because I want to connect to this area over here. We're just going to draw something. Just going to freehand a roadway in because one thing I want to get to is some grading. So let's just go in. Let's do a freehand. Let's start the solver up. I'm going to fill it. So let's fill it the other one roadway to the next. Again, I'm still an engineer. I don't like having things that don't look right. Like I want my nice curves. So again, we'll come in, just pick a couple of these, make them look nice and pretty. Because, you know, let's just say this is the road we're working on. Everybody's happy. Everything on the right, my constraints look good. Everything looks, again, just the way we want it. The next biggest thing every client wants to know is what does it cost? And a lot of times in residential, we want to tell them what it costs. But again, a lot of times we sort of do a swag. Hey, last time we did a project like this, it cost so much per lot or per acre. Because the idea of grading this, and we don't even know if this is the design everybody likes. We may turn it to planning board and they say, change this, add a cul-de-sac. You know, we get too many cul-de-sacs. It's not enough connectivity. All kinds of things can drive us crazy. But I want to know, what does this cost? I want to get an idea of how much earth am I moving. So the next button in the upper right, I'm going to click. I'm going to give it just a second to open up so y'all can see it. Yeah, this is one of those times where it may slow down for you a little bit on the internet, but just give it a second. It's worth the wait. What you're seeing is SiteOps go through. Right now I'm doing a preliminary grade. It's around 10,000 grading plans. Red is cut, blue is fill. It's how can I meet all my lot and roadway constraints. And in the lower right, you'll actually see the budget. And it's trying to meet all those roadway constraints and give us the best cost of construction. So you can actually see I'm stepping the lots down because that's what I told it. But if I told it don't do house pads and just transition those out, then fine. If I told it to leave it wide open and just cut roadways, cut roadways. Again, it's whatever I want to, I can assign that to it. And you'll see a big difference. If you look on the right, see my nice M's coming down that right-hand roadway. But if I look at the left, which I had not assigned a roadway type to, again, you can see that SiteOps thinks of them completely different. And you can export this to any of your favorite CAD tools. So you have tons of information to go forward. Now, one thing I want to show you real quick, because I don't want to run out of time. Roadway grading is essential in residential. If I'm doing a 100-foot driveway from an existing road to a parking lot, the driveway is still important. But let's be honest, it's not to the level of importance that we would for a residential street. Because we got to deal with utilities, we got to deal with creek crossings, we got to deal with all kind of different things, right? So inside SiteOps, what happens is when it grades and does its optimization, it's looking at what is the cheapest cost. and it's trying to apply everything it can. So for example, if we look at this roadway section, I just took a profile. Red is existing, white is top of roadway, green is subgrade. We do go to subgrade if you tell it the material thickness. But here's a problem. This road is not drivable. It's garbage. So I need SiteOps to go in basically like a second level of optimization. I need to take this and I need to put a best fit curve, basically come in and take my normal way of designing. I want a K value. Let's say it's a collector, so I need 30. We need 100-foot tangents, and then I just want to set back and say okay, and let SiteOps go to work again. It's now going to take that most cost optimized version, and it's going to cost a little bit more now because again, I'm going to have to cut down a few hills, going to have to fill in a few valleys, but I got to make my design work. But I'm going to let SiteOps give me, again, just in a few moments, another run at it. And as you see, again, just because the internet is probably not going really fast on my end, it goes really fast at saying, hey, how can I meet all these requirements? And you see it came up with many, many versions. And I do have still all control of this. So if I want to come in and say, oh, let's move that low point. And for example, if you see just to the left of the PVI, that tangent went red because it went less than 100 feet. So if I had to have a 100-foot tangent, I'm going to have to move that over till I meet that requirement. Again, a lot of different things we can play with. It all is automated. That's what I love about it. Again, I'm spending more time being the designer, less about drafting. And then when I close this down, I've now applied this to that roadway. So when it grades, it's going to grade based on that constraint I just gave it. And the beauty is, if I go through and do all the other roadways and they're all linked together, if I move one, the other one changes with it. And that, to me, is really cool. I go and change a creek crossing, it would change all the other pieces that go along with it. So you can see, for example, definitely a lot more grading because I raised that area for the creek crossing. And there's ways to go into SiteOps and tell things that they're environmental and all other kind of things that I do not want to grade. And again, another webinar, tons of them out there, look at how to deal with things about how to control grading. But quickly we ran in and we've now done that subdivision. And again, just give you a quick, I want to show you just a quick view of what I mean by when one thing changes, so does another one. So let's bring up my profiler. I'm going to try to make this work on one screen. This is like most softwares. You really want to run this part on two screens, and most of us do. Let's zoom in. If you notice along the bottom as I'm moving my mouse in the profiler, so right in here, there's another roadway. So let's pick on this drive, and I want to come in and do the same thing. I'm going to come in. I'm going to do a best fit on it real quick. Let's say I got to have a K value of 20. I can go with 50-foot tangents, let it run for 20, 30 seconds. It's going to give me a better design. And if you look on, when it gets done, on the ends, it's going to lock this into place. Because these endpoints, as you can see the cross section of the other road, I've told the cross section of that road to be 3.13%, and it held that in. Now we're going to be able to go in, and let's go back, and let's just close this for a second, and I want to reopen them back up. So I'm going to open the top one. So we now have this roadway, and let's go in and zoom in. Go back to that roadway. So I can now see that as things change, they will change automatically. So again, the beauty of this is what we love is being able to come in and do quick revisions, do multiple things with again, very little effort. Because somebody's going to say you need to put more of a creek crossing, you need bigger pipes. The bypass is bigger than we thought. All kind of different scenarios. Maybe I don't want this little turn here. So as you go in, I could actually start identifying where are the different bits and pieces of the project, so that we can come in and start manipulating things as we go further. So I wanted to show that. Just want to let you know that when we go to grading, again, there's two stages, as I would call it. There's the conceptual stage of everything, and then there's the fine-tuning. I want to go in and change a few items, make things a little bit better as we go forward. Now, before we get out, I know we're running up around a little right at our time or past it. One thing I want to show real quick is there's also another part of this. It's telling the story. And this is something we've been doing for we've been doing it with SiteOps since the very beginning, working with other softwares last year and working with Lumen RT. You can do this in residential just as easy as you can do it inside SiteOps. So if I like what I got, I could come in and fully build this out. I could even bring in a house model. Now, the only downfall to put the same house model on every lot. So sometimes people place the house inside of Lumen RT so you can have individual. But since it's a 3D model, I can then just export this straight out. Again, I can export this to any of my favorite CAD tools or save it as a file to start going down plan production and going that way, or I can go straight out to Lumen RT. And what we end up with, this is another type of project I showed that I did just outside of Philadelphia. But as you can see, I did some more of a mixed use, but this is basically out of SiteOps. And you can see I like the residential because you can actually see the padded lots that haven't been built on yet. And I can actually see the house. Just placed a couple different houses, but this helps tell the story. I got a little bit of multifamily up front. I got a swimming pool. I got somebody swimming. Let's turn on some better resolution. I got shadows. The sun will move. Things will change. So I can get really crazy. If I want to, look at traffic, I can add traffic in just a few moments. I'm going to zoom around just for a quick second. I want to show one thing. We have a McDonald's on here. And you can even go in and show nighttime, which is one of the things I absolutely love, because a lot of times people, like for example in that Coke plant beside the residential, if we're probably wouldn't build that, but if we did, how would we do maybe some of the buffering? How would the truck lights look through? So you can see now I've just basically went in and told it we got some lights around the building. We got my lamp post, and I can actually see how they're illuminating correctly throughout the site. And you can even see in the background, you can see the highway off to the side. You can actually see the car lights as they're going down the highway. So it's pretty cool, right? This is something really neat. If the car's in motion, it's going to have the car lights on. But this is the kind of thing we want to get to. And this is the talk about not just doing 500 lot subdivision in an hour. It's doing the design. It's getting a budget, because one thing SiteOps delivers is in the back end, you keep playing with it. You can do some stormwater. You can add your own costs. I can offset the center line and say it costs so much per linear foot of roadway for the water line. I'm going to draw sewer in there manually. Say it's a sewer main or a sewer line, and every point where I make a turn, that's a manhole. And you can come in and get into your clearing, your topsoil, retaining walls, asphalt, curb, gutter, south, all this kind of stuff to get to a detailed budget. So they're just not looking at a guess. They're looking at something substantial. They can say, yep, that looks pretty good. So let's jump back into the PowerPoint, and then we'll get into some questions and answers.